Hey, you guys, thanks for listening in to this episode. On today, we have Miss Susan with us on Tips with T. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much, T.
Thank you so much for being on the show today. So, tell us more about yourself and what you do.
Sure. So, my name is Susan Tripi, and I am a women's empowerment coach. And so, what that means and how I work with clients is that I guide women through life transitions, whether that is going through the process of separation and divorce, whether that's going through a health crisis and figuring out what next steps are and how to create support around yourself, whether that's making a career change and identifying new roles, whether that's starting a business, taking your passion and turning it into a business. And I'm also all about self care. So I weave self care into everything that I do. And lastly, I work with nonprofits. I have a background in the nonprofit sector. And so I consult with nonprofits that have a mission to empower women or girls or anyone who identifies as a woman.
Awesome. So, tell us more about your journey of becoming an entrepreneur. Like, what made you decide to become an entrepreneur?
So it has been a bit of a journey, right? As is the case with most people through their life, it's an evolution. As I mentioned, I spent about 20 years in the nonprofit sector and enjoyed my time. And and then I reached this this point in my life where I went through burnout and was diagnosed with adrenal fatigue. And my doctor pretty much said, you need to stop working and let your body recover and reset. And part of the focus during that time was to discover practices of self care and recognize my own tendencies of dealing with stress and how to find some better ways of dealing with stress.
Mhm.
And through that recovery process, I had a lot of time to reflect and to think and to assess on what are my next steps in life, right? And around that point is when I made the decision that I wanted to shift out of the nonprofit sector and become an entrepreneur, to start my own business, recognizing that all along I had many of the skill sets that are necessary for launching and starting a business, right? And so it was time for me to just take that leap and to do it. And so part of the reasons why I shifted is, I wanted a little more flexibility in my schedule. I wanted the ability to work with clients from all over the country and support nonprofits doing amazing work all over the country. And I was looking for a space that would give me a little more control. Rather than answering to someone or to a board, I wanted a little more control over listening to my gut and being able to follow through on that and implement the services that I the ways that I want to serve in the world and how I want to take my knowledge and offer that into supporting other organizations. So I guess the answer would be I was looking for a little more control and flexibility over my time.
Awesome. So you would say, so I guess you would say all that would kind of did like inspire you to do women's empowerment coach. But I guess what also like kind of just made you say, okay, well, I want to really just target women.
Mhm.
So what made you decide to just to target women?
So this little thing called COVID hit, right, last year. And like many of your guests, I'm sure, are sharing that COVID really disrupted life in many ways. And it also created space to reflect, to assess, to think.
Mhm.
And so I went through that season too, because immediately my consulting work with nonprofits stopped, right? Because life shut down in every way. And during that time, of course, I was giving out free coaching calls and doing what I could to support the nonprofit community. And in that, COVID really created space for me to think, am I really aligned with what I want to do?
Mhm.
Is this the one way that I want to serve and take my energy and serve in this world. And through that process of reflecting, I realized that the common thread that has been present throughout my life from a very young age is women's empowerment and a focus on opening up space for women to lead and serve in every sector that they desire to be in. Advocacy work around understanding the connections that are present that act as barriers to allowing women into different spaces or seeing the need for women in all of these spaces. And going through a number of life transitions myself, realizing that there are gaps in care, there are gaps in service provision to women who are going through
Mhm.
life transitions. And so I made this shift into women's empowerment and feel like for the first time I'm fully aligned with the passion that I have in my heart and the purpose that I believe I'm here to serve in this world.
Awesome. Awesome. So you're very familiar with nonprofits. I am interested in starting a nonprofit. So,
Mhm.
how can someone start a nonprofit organization during this time, even though we're in the pandemic? I guess, can you kind of walk us through some of the basic steps to get started?
Yes. So I'm so thrilled to hear this because I still have a passion and will always have a passion for the work of the nonprofit sector, right? And so um, and I'm so encouraged to learn and to continue to hear that many women are using this time to
Mhm.
step into that and to bring that purpose to fruition, right? So here are some suggestions that I will offer on how to start or thinking of starting a nonprofit. What are some of the first steps that you should do? So the first is to take an assessment of your community, right? In terms of um, what you're proposing as a mission, who you want to serve, and really understanding what are the needs of that demographic specifically. Doing your research, whether that's having focus panels, whether that's reading books and studying articles, whether that's um, talking to other civic organizations and other nonprofits and elected leaders to really find out what are the needs of this target demographic that you want to serve. And then taking a step back to say, in what ways is this community already being served
Mhm.
by other nonprofits or civic groups or organizations locally? To first know, is there really a need? Is there really a need for another nonprofit in your space, right? Because competition, unfortunately, is a real thing. And I wish that it wasn't. I wish that there was more of a spirit of collaboration
Right.
rather than competition. And when it comes to fundraising in the initial years is very challenging. And so part of the reason why I always recommend doing research is so that one, you know what you're talking about when you're meeting with donors and you're asking for funding, because you have to prove that there's a viable need, right? And you have to come prepared with statistics, and you have to come prepared to show how your mission meets this gap in terms of service. So the first is doing your research. And then the second is you want to know who the other players are in
Mhm.
your space so that you can build collaborations with those individuals, right? And that you can build partnerships across sectors and with other nonprofits in particular, so that way you are expanding the pool of services for your target demographic. And then I would also say, as a third tip, be conscious of who you are asking to serve on your board of directors, right? And so a lot of founders often make this mistake of just pulling on their friends and family onto the board because legally they have to have a certain number of board members to file for their nonprofit status. And so they often rush that process just to get the ball moving without having given thoughtful consideration to the roles of their board, the term limits of their board, and the skill sets that are needed to not only speak into creating the policies and the systems that are necessary in the first few years as you're building infrastructure, but also the ability to help fundraise during those initial years too. So I would suggest looking for the right people rather than pulling any warm body on your board in those initial years.
I'm glad you said that because I actually had, I mean, I don't really know a lot about nonprofits, but I do know um starting one, but I do know about like serving on the board and things like that in order to get um affiliated and get filed correctly. And I was telling this person he was wanting to start a nonprofit, and I was like, well, make sure you have to get your board members together and make sure you're getting people on your board that are very passionate about what you're trying
Yes.
to do and what you're trying to push through. If not, you're just going to have a board member that's sitting there that's not really contributing to your vision and to your purpose, and they are not going to be able to bring anything to the table but just being a placeholder. And so I'm
Exactly.
glad you said that, because and I'm glad I was that you said that, because I feel happy that I advised him the right way, because some people just to get people on their board, and I'm like, no, you don't want to just do that. You want someone that's going to have the same vision and passion, that's really going to be in it with you and support you during the process.
Exactly. And it's well worth taking the extra few months. When you think about the timeline, there's such a rush to just get the process done and to file and to receive your tax status. And then no, it's well worth the extra few months of doing your research, of building relationships and finding the right people to serve, and then moving through the motion of, completing your application process. It's well worth the extra couple of months to make sure that you're starting out on a strong foot.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So, what nonprofit success courses are you offering during this time, or will be offering the upcoming months, so people can know if they would like to start? I will advise them to get training on how to start.
Certainly. So this is one of my passion areas, right? Is offering courses and classes and workshops that help individuals who have this burning passion and desire to start a nonprofit understand what is involved in building the infrastructure of your nonprofit in those first few years and thinking about all of that, right? So I have this one course called Nonprofit Success, which I'm happy to share the link to. That will be starting in late April. It's a 5-week class, and we move through all the key areas of infrastructure in the first few years. So in week 1, we talk about how to do the research and know whether this mission and that you have in your heart is needed, and how to do the research of understanding, analyzing the need, analyzing the demographic, analyzing the gaps, all of that stuff, right? The community mapping and understanding who else is in the community. Then we move through and we look at the application process. What's involved? What's the paperwork that's involved? Should you hire a lawyer? Should you not? I mean, we talk about all those things. And then every week after that, we're looking at another significant area. So we're looking at board members and how to attract and how to develop a board matrix, how to determine what the skill sets are that you need for your nonprofit, and how to find the right board members and train the right board members and build support for that team. And then we also move through fundraising. How do you put together a fundraising plan? And how do you identify the right donors, both for seed money in the beginning and then also for monthly giving, because it's all about sustainability, right? So we talk a lot about sustainable fundraising efforts and revenue generation. And then we also look at how to attract the right volunteers and expand capacity so that you're not doing all the things on your own. And so how to find the right people to fill the right roles, and then how to transition your organization from volunteer based to when is it the right time to start hiring staff, right? So, and then the last week we talked through things like how to do community outreach and how to build collaborations and partnerships. And so that's one way that folks who are interested can participate in learning more about nonprofit startup before moving through the process.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Miss Susan, for coming on today on the show. I'm hoping people will attend your nonprofit success course because it's very, very well needed, especially if you want to start a nonprofit to get it done correctly.
Mhm.
So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share your social media handles so people can see how to get in contact with you, and you can tell people how to get in contact with you if you would like.
Wonderful. Yes. So you can find me on Instagram at Susan Tripi Coaching. It's also the same handle on Facebook as well. And then I do have a Facebook group called Find Your Fierce with Susan Tripi. You can look that up. And then, of course, you can visit my website at susantripi.com, and I'll spell that for you. It's SUSANTRIPI.com. And there will be a link there to the nonprofit success course too.
Awesome. Awesome. And if you guys want to get in contact with me, you could do so. My number is 910-317-0396. You can shoot me an email at contact@mjfinancial.biz. You can schedule a consultation on my website, www.mjfinancial.biz. You can find this episode on Anchor, you guys, and you can also find the playback for this video on the YouTube channel for M&J Financial Management. So thank you once again, Miss Susan, for being on. Um, the show today, talking to us about nonprofits and about your journey.
Thank you so much, Tia. I appreciate you having me as a guest today.
You are so welcome. And you guys, we will see you on the next episode of Tips with T.